In 1990, a 12-year-old girl vanished from a bustling mall in the heart of Cloverdale, Oregon. Emily Harper was last seen window shopping at a jewelry store, her laughter echoing through the crowded halls. But she never made it home. For 10 years, her disappearance haunted the small town, a wound that refused to heal. Then, one ordinary morning, a neighbor's backyard renovation uncovered something chilling. Emily's bracelet, buried deep in the earth, a silent clue to a decade-old mystery. What happened to Emily Harper, and why was her bracelet hidden in plain sight? The morning sun filtered through the pines as Sarah Harper, Emily's mother, laced up her running shoes. At 45, she still ran every dawn, a ritual born from necessity after her daughter vanished. The steady thud of her sneakers on the pavement was her anchor, keeping the grief at bay. It was 10 years to the day since Emily disappeared, and Cloverdale's clock tower chimed 7 o'clock as Sarah rounded the corner of Maple Street, her breath steady despite the ache in her chest. Emily had been 12, all braces and freckles, excited about a new charm bracelet she'd begged for that day at the mall. Sarah could still picture her twirling it on her wrist, the tiny silver heart glinting under fluorescent lights. They'd gone to the Cloverdale Mall together, a mother-daughter outing. Sarah had stepped away for just 10 minutes to grab coffee. When she returned, Emily was gone. The first years were a blur of police searches, flyers plastered on every pole, and sleepless nights clutching Emily's stuffed rabbit. The town rallied. Volunteers scoured parks, forests, even the river, but found nothing. No witnesses, no ransom notes, just a void where Emily had been. Sarah's runs became her therapy, each step a defiance against despair. She varied her routes to avoid sinking into routine, a trap that felt too much like giving up. Today, her path took her past the old Thompson house, a tidy ranch-style home owned by Jim Thompson, a retired schoolteacher and Cloverdale's unofficial historian. But something was off. Police cars lined the street, their lights flashing silently. A backhoe sat idle in the backyard, surrounded by yellow tape. A small crowd, neighbors, mostly huddled at the edge of the property, whispering. Sarah slowed, her pulse quickening. "What's going on?" she asked, approaching a familiar face, Mrs. Callahan, who lived 2 doors down. The older woman's eyes were wide with that mix of curiosity and dread small-town gossip thrives on. "They were digging up Jim's backyard for a new patio," she said, voice low. "The crew found something buried, something that shouldn't be there. They're saying it's a bracelet, a kid's bracelet." Sarah's stomach lurched. She pushed closer, ignoring Mrs. Callahan's protest. Through the crowd, she saw Detective Laura Kessler, a no-nonsense cop who'd worked Emily's case a decade ago. Laura spotted Sarah and froze, her face softening into something that made Sarah's knees weak, pity. "Sarah," Laura said, hurrying over, her voice gentle but firm, "we tried calling you. You weren't home." "I was running," Sarah managed, her throat dry. "What's happening, Laura? What did they find?" Laura hesitated, glancing back at the taped-off yard. "We need you to come with us. It might be related to Emily." The world tilted. Sarah gripped Laura's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "What did you find?" Laura's eyes held hers, steady but heavy. A bracelet, silver with a heart charm, buried about 3 feet down. "We need you to identify it." Sarah followed Laura through the crowd, her legs moving on autopilot. The backyard was a mess of upturned earth, the backhoe's claw frozen mid-dig. Officers stood around a small evidence bag, their faces grim. Laura held it up, and Sarah's breath caught. The bracelet was tarnished but unmistakable, a delicate silver chain, a single heart charm dangling from it. Sarah's knees buckled, and Laura caught her, guiding her to a nearby lawn chair. "Is it hers?" Laura asked softly. Sarah nodded, unable to speak. 10 years of questions, of hoping against hope, crashed into this moment. Emily's bracelet, buried in Jim Thompson's backyard. The kindly neighbor who'd brought casseroles after the disappearance, who'd joined search parties, who'd sat with Sarah at community vigils. Why was it here? Sarah's hand shook as she stared at the evidence bag, the silver heart charm glinting faintly through the plastic. Detective Laura Kessler crouched beside her, voice low but urgent. "Sarah, I know this is a lot. We're going to need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. Can you do that?" Sarah nodded numbly, her mind racing. Jim Thompson's backyard. The man who'd taught Emily's fifth-grade history class, who'd always waved from his porch with a smile. How could his yard hold her daughter's bracelet? Laura guided her to a police cruiser, the crowd's whispers fading as the door shut. Sarah clutched her water bottle, the only thing grounding her as they drove the short distance to Cloverdale's small police station. Inside, the station smelled of stale coffee and ink. Laura led her to a cramped interview room where Officer Tim Reyes, Laura's younger partner, waited with a notepad. "Start from the beginning," Laura said, her tone professional but kind. "Anything you remember about that day at the mall? Anything about Jim Thompson?" Sarah recounted the memory she'd relived 1,000 times. Emily's excitement over the bracelet, the crowded mall, the coffee shop line. "I was gone 10 minutes, she said, voice cracking. "I came back and she was just gone. The jewelry store clerk said she'd stepped outside to look at something. No one saw anything else." She paused, then added, "Jim was at the vigils. He helped search. He even brought us food for weeks after." Laura exchanged a glance with Tim. "Did Jim ever act unusual? Say anything odd about Emily?" Sarah shook her head. "He was always kind. Too kind, maybe. Always checking in, asking if I'd heard anything new." Her stomach twisted. Had she missed something? Laura leaned forward. "The bracelet was buried deliberately, Sarah. Wrapped in plastic, like someone wanted it hidden but preserved. We're searching Jim's property now, but we need to be thorough. He's at the station, being questioned." Sarah's breath hitched. "You think he took her?" Laura's face was unreadable. "We don't know yet, but we're going to find out." The interview stretched on, each question pulling Sarah deeper into memories she'd tried to bury. When they finally let her go, Laura handed her a card. "Call me if you think of anything else. We'll keep you updated." Sarah stepped into the midday sun, her mind a tangle of fear and suspicion. She couldn't go home, not yet. The thought of her empty house, Emily's untouched room, was unbearable. Instead, she walked the 3 blocks to Cloverdale's public library, a quiet haven where she'd spent countless hours researching missing children cases. The librarian, Mrs. Evelyn Grant, looked up from her desk, her face softening with recognition. "Sarah, dear, I heard about the bracelet. Are you okay?" Sarah managed a weak smile. "I just need somewhere quiet to think." Evelyn led her to a small study room, its window overlooking a rose garden. Sarah sank into a chair, her running clothes still damp with sweat. She pulled out her wallet, where she kept a photo of Emily smiling, holding that damn bracelet. The image blurred as tears welled up. Why Jim's yard? What was he hiding? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock. Evelyn stood at the door, holding a cardboard box. "This came for you this morning," she said. "No return address, but it's marked urgent. I didn't want to bother you earlier." Sarah frowned, taking the box. It was light, sealed with plain tape. She tore it open, revealing a single item, a small leather notebook, worn but intact. Her heart stopped. It was Emily's diary, the one she'd carried everywhere, filled with doodles and dreams. Sarah hadn't seen it since the day Emily vanished. She opened it with trembling hands. Emily's childish handwriting spilled across the pages, notes about school, friends, the bracelet she'd begged for. But the last entry, dated the day of the disappearance, was different. "Met Mr. T at the mall today. He said he had a surprise for me, something special. I'm supposed to meet him by the fountain at 3 o'clock. Don't tell Mom." Sarah's blood ran cold. Mr. T, Jim Thompson. The diary slipped from her hands, landing with a soft thud. She needed to get this to Laura now. But as she stood, a shadow passed the window. She froze. A man stood in the garden, staring directly at her. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket. He turned and vanished behind the roses before she could make out his face. Sarah's heart pounded as she grabbed Emily's diary and bolted from the study room. "Evelyn!" she called, her voice sharp with panic. The librarian looked up from the circulation desk, startled. There was a man outside, watching me, in the garden. Evelyn hurried to the window, peering out. "I don't see anyone, dear. Are you sure?" Sarah nodded, clutching the diary to her chest. "He was right there. And this," she held up the notebook. "It's Emily's. Someone sent it to me today. I need to get to the police station." Evelyn's eyes widened. "Let me call you a taxi. It's not safe to walk alone, not after." She trailed off, but Sarah knew what she meant. Not after the bracelet, not after a stranger lurking outside. While waiting for the taxi, Sarah flipped through the diary again. Her new reading glasses, a cheap pair she'd grabbed from a pharmacy weeks ago, perched on her nose. The entry about Mr. T burned into her mind. Had Jim Thompson lured Emily away? The thought made her sick. The taxi arrived, a yellow sedan driven by a grizzled man who barely spoke. Sarah slid into the back seat, giving the police station's address. As they pulled away, she glanced back at the library. No sign of the man in the jacket, but the unease lingered like a shadow. At the station, Detective Laura Kessler was in a meeting, but Officer Tim Reyes met Sarah in the lobby. "You've got something new?" he asked, eyeing the diary. Sarah handed it over, her voice trembling as she explained the delivery and the final entry. Tim's brow furrowed as he read. "This is big, Sarah. We'll get this to Laura right away. Thompson's still in holding, but he's not talking. Claims he doesn't know how the bracelet got in his yard." Sarah's frustration flared. "He was at the mall that day. Emily wrote it herself." "Why aren't you pushing him harder?" Tim raised a hand, placating. "We are, but we need evidence to hold him. This diary helps. Sit tight, and I'll get Laura." Sarah sank into a hard plastic chair in the waiting area, her mind spiraling. Jim Thompson had always been a fixture in Cloverdale, teaching kids, organizing town history exhibits, even hosting barbecues. Could he have been hiding something monstrous all this time? Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion at the front desk. A man in a dark jacket, all broad-shouldered, was arguing with the desk sergeant. Sarah's breath caught. It was him, the man from the garden. He glanced her way, their eyes meeting for a split second before he turned and strode out. Sarah jumped up, heart racing. "Tim!" she called, rushing to the desk. "That man, he was at the library, watching me." Tim frowned, stepping outside to scan the parking lot. "He's gone. Did you get a good look at him?" Sarah shook her head. "Not his face, but he's following me, I know it." Tim jotted a note. "We'll check the security cameras. Could be a reporter sniffing around Emily's case, got some press today with the bracelet. But we'll look into it." Sarah wasn't convinced. Reporters didn't lurk in gardens. Before she could argue, Laura emerged from a back office, holding the diary. "Sarah, this is a game changer. We're bringing Thompson in for another round of questioning. Want to observe? You might catch something we miss." Sarah followed Laura to an observation room, a dim space with a one-way mirror. Jim Thompson sat at a metal table, his grey hair disheveled, his usual calm demeanor fraying. Laura entered the interrogation room, tossing the diary onto the table. "Care to explain this, Jim? Emily Harper's diary, saying she was meeting you at the mall the day she vanished." Jim's face paled, but he shook his head. "I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't at the mall that day. I was at the school, grading papers." Laura leaned in. "Your backyard says otherwise. Her bracelet was buried there, Jim. And now this. You were close to Emily, weren't you? Always giving her extra attention in class." Jim's hands clenched. "I cared about all my students. Emily was bright, curious. But I didn't meet her that day. Someone's setting me up." Sarah's stomach churned. His denial sounded genuine, but the evidence was damning. Laura pressed harder, but Jim stuck to his story. After 20 minutes, Laura stepped out, joining Sarah. "He's not budging," she said. "But we're holding him for now. The diary and bracelet give us enough to dig deeper literally. We're expanding the search of his property." Sarah nodded, but her mind was on the man in the jacket. "Laura, that man I saw, he's connected to this, I feel it." Laura's eyes narrowed. "We'll pull the tapes. In the meantime, go home, Sarah. Get some rest. We'll call you with updates." Sarah wanted to argue, but exhaustion was creeping in. She took a taxi home, the diary now in police custody, but its words seared into her memory. Her house felt too quiet. Emily's absence, a physical weight. She locked every door, checked every window, then sank onto the couch, staring at a photo of Emily on the mantel. The bracelet, the diary, the man in the jacket, pieces of a puzzle she couldn't yet solve. As night fell, a soft thud came from the backyard. Sarah froze, her pulse spiking. Just the wind, she told herself. But when she peered through the blinds, a shadow moved near the fence. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as the shadow shifted near the fence, a dark silhouette against the faint glow of a streetlight. Her fingers tightened on the blinds, heart hammering. She grabbed her phone, dialing the police station's non-emergency line. "This is Sarah Harper," she whispered when the desk sergeant answered. "There's someone in my backyard. Send someone now, please." The sergeant promised a patrol car within minutes, but every second felt like an eternity. Sarah crept to the kitchen, snatching a flashlight and the pepper spray she'd carried since Emily's disappearance. She didn't dare go outside, but she needed to see. Peering through the back door's small window, she aimed the flashlight's beam. The yard was empty now, the shadow gone, but the gate at the far end hung slightly ajar, swaying in the night breeze. Had she left it unlatched? She couldn't remember. Sirens approached, and Sarah exhaled, stepping outside as a patrol car pulled up. 2 officers swept the yard, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. "Nothing here, ma'am," one said, a young woman with a tight ponytail. "Gates open, but no signs of forced entry. Could have been an animal or kids." Sarah shook her head. "It was a person. I saw them." The officer nodded, jotting notes. "We'll do a sweep of the neighborhood. Lock up tight and call if you see anything else." Back inside, Sarah double-checked every lock. Her nerves frayed. Sleep was impossible. She sat at the kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. The diary's words replayed in her mind. "Met Mr. T at the mall today. He said he had a surprise for me. Jim Thompson was in custody, but the man in the jacket wasn't. Was he working with Jim? Or was he after something else?" Her thoughts were interrupted by the phone ringing, shrill in the quiet house. She grabbed it, expecting Laura. Instead, a low, unfamiliar voice said, "Stop digging, Sarah. You're making things worse." The line went dead before she could respond. Her hands shook as she dialed Laura's direct number. Voicemail. "Laura, it's Sarah. Someone just called, told me to stop digging. I saw someone in my yard tonight. Please call me back." She hung up, fear giving way to anger. Whoever was behind this thought, they could scare her off. They didn't know her. She'd spent 10 years fighting for answers about Emily. She wasn't stopping now. At dawn, unable to stay still, Sarah drove to the police station. Laura was there, looking like she hadn't slept either. "I got your message," Laura said, ushering her into the same cramped interview room. "We traced the call burner phone, untraceable, but we're taking it seriously. The man in the jacket showed up on the library's security footage, but his face is obscured. We're cross-referencing with more footage from 1990. Sarah leaned forward. "What about Jim? Did he say anything new?" Laura sighed. "He's sticking to his story, claims he was framed. But we found something in his house last night. A box of old Polaroids, hidden in the attic. Most are of Cloverdale events, but a few, they show Emily. At the mall, the park, school, taken from a distance, like he was watching her." Sarah's stomach churned. "He was stalking her?" Laura nodded grimly. "Looks that way. We're sending the photos for forensic analysis. Maybe we can pin down dates or locations, and we're still digging in his yard. If there's more evidence, we'll find it." Sarah left the station, her mind a storm of questions. Jim's photos, the threatening call, the man in the jacket, it was all connected. But how? She needed answers, and sitting around waiting for the police wasn't enough. She drove to the Cloverdale Historical Society, where Jim had volunteered for years. If he was hiding something, maybe he'd left a trace there. The small brick building smelled of old paper and dust. A volunteer, an elderly man named Carl, greeted her. "Sarah, I'm so sorry about everything. How can I help?" She hesitated, then said, "I need to see Jim Thompson's records. Anything he worked on, exhibits, archives, anything." Carl led her to a cluttered back room filled with filing cabinets. Jim was meticulous, he said, pulling out a drawer labeled Thompson Projects. Sarah sifted through folders, town history displays, old maps, newspaper clippings. One file caught her eye, marked Mall Renovation 1990. Inside were blueprints of the Cloverdale Mall, with handwritten notes in Jim's precise script. One note, circled in red, read, "Basement access sealed post. Construction, key with DM." Sarah's pulse quickened. DM, a person? A place? She slipped the blueprint into her bag, thanking Carl before hurrying out. As she stepped into the parking lot, a black sedan idled across the street. The driver's face was hidden, but she felt his eyes on her. Sarah's grip tightened on the blueprint as she hurried to her car, the black sedan's presence burning into her awareness. She didn't look back, didn't want to give the driver the satisfaction of knowing she'd noticed. Her hands shook as she started the engine, pulling out of the Historical Society's lot. The sedan didn't follow, at least, not that she could see, but the threat from last night's call echoed in her mind. "Stop digging, Sarah." She wasn't stopping. Not now. Not when she was this close to something real. The blueprint's note, "Basement access, sealed post-construction, key with DM," was a lead, and she needed to understand it before whoever was watching her closed in. She drove to the Cloverdale Mall, the place where Emily had vanished. The sprawling complex had aged, but still drew crowds. Sarah parked near the main entrance, her heart heavy with memories of that day, Emily's laughter, the heart charm glinting on her wrist. She tucked the blueprint under her jacket and headed inside. The mall was quieter this early, shops just opening. Sarah navigated to the administrative office, a small suite tucked behind the food court. A receptionist, a young woman with a bored expression, looked up. "Can I help you?" Sarah forced a calm tone. "I'm researching the mall's history for a project. I need access to old building records blueprints, renovations from the year 1990. The receptionist frowned. "That's not something we usually. I'd need to check with my manager." Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. "It's about Emily Harper. I'm her mother." The woman's eyes widened, recognition dawning. Let me call someone." Minutes later, an older man in a rumpled suit appeared. Dan Mitchell, the mall's facilities manager. His name tag read, D. Mitchell. Sarah's pulse spiked. "DM? Mrs. Harper," Dan said, his tone sympathetic but cautious. "I heard about the bracelet. What do you need?" Sarah hesitated, then decided to play it safe. "I found a reference to a 1990 renovation, something about a sealed basement access. Can you tell me about it?" Dan's expression shifted, a flicker of unease. "That was before my time, but yeah, there was a renovation back then. Added the east wing, sealed off some old storage areas. Why do you ask?" Sarah pulled out the blueprint, pointing to Jim's note. "This says there's a sealed basement access, and the keys with DM. That's you, isn't it?" Dan stiffened, his eyes darting to the paper. "I don't know anything about a key. Those old basements were sealed for safety structural issues. No one's been down there in decades." His voice was too smooth, his denial too quick. Sarah pressed. "Can I see the sealed access? For peace of mind." Dan hesitated, then sighed. "Fine, but it's just a concrete wall. Follow me." He led her through a service corridor, past humming vending machines and stacks of cleaning supplies. The air grew cooler as they descended a narrow stairwell to the mall's lower level. At the end of a dimly lit hallway, a concrete wall blocked what looked like a former doorway. "See?" Dan said, gesturing. "Sealed tight, nothing to find." Sarah studied the wall, her flashlight beam catching faint cracks in the concrete. Something felt off. The wall looked newer than the surrounding structure, its texture slightly different. "Was this always concrete?" she asked. Dan shrugged. "Far as I know, look. I've got a meeting. You good here?" Sarah nodded, and he left, his footsteps echoing up the stairs. Alone, Sarah ran her hands over the wall. The cracks formed a rectangular outline, almost like a door. She pressed, but nothing moved. The blueprint mentioned a key. Where was it? Her thoughts were interrupted by a faint sound, like a muffled thump, from behind the wall. She froze, pressing her ear to the concrete. Silence. Then another thump, softer, rhythmic. Her heart raced. Was someone or something back there? She needed tools, maybe a crowbar to investigate. But first, she needed Laura. She hurried back to the main level, pulling out her phone to call the detective. No signal. The basement's thick walls blocked it. She'd have to go outside. As she climbed the stairs, a shadow moved at the corridor's end. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, dark jacket, the same one from the library, the police station. He didn't approach, just stood there, watching. Sarah's pepper spray was in her hand before she realized she'd grabbed it. "Who are you?" she called, voice echoing. He didn't answer, just turned and vanished around a corner. Sarah sprinted after him, but when she reached the spot, he was gone, the corridor empty. Her chest heaved, fear mixing with determination. He wasn't a reporter. He was part of this, whatever this was. She needed to get to Laura, now. Outside, her phone finally caught a signal. She dialed Laura, who answered on the second ring. "Sarah, what's wrong?" Sarah spilled everything, the blueprint, Dan Mitchell's evasiveness, the sealed wall, the man in the jacket. "I heard something behind that wall, Laura, like someone's trapped. You need to get here." Laura's voice was sharp. "Stay put. I'm sending a team. Don't go back down there alone." Sarah agreed, but as she hung up, a glint on the ground caught her eye. A small brass key lying near the service entrance. No markings, but it looked modern, out of place. She picked it up, her fingers trembling. Was this the key Jim's note mentioned, and how had it gotten here? Sarah clutched the brass key, its edges biting into her palm as she stood outside the Cloverdale Mall's service entrance. The morning sun was climbing higher, but the air felt heavy with the weight of what she'd heard behind that concrete wall. Thumps, faint but deliberate, like a plea from the dark. Her instincts screamed that Emily was connected to this, maybe even behind that wall. But Laura's warning echoed. "Don't go back down there alone." Sarah glanced at the parking lot, half expecting the man in the dark jacket to reappear. It was empty, but the prickling sense of being watched didn't fade. She slipped the key into her pocket and hurried to her car, locking the doors as soon as she was inside. She needed to get this key to Laura, but first, she had to know what it opened. Back at the police station, the lobby was busier now, officers bustling with the day's work. Sarah found Laura in her office, hunched over a stack of files. The detective looked up, her face tight with exhaustion. "Sarah, I told you to stay put. What's this about a key?" Sarah set it on the desk, explaining where she'd found it. Laura's eyes narrowed as she turned it over in her hands. "No markings, but it's modern. Could be for anything, a locker, a gate. That wall you mentioned." She bagged it as evidence. "We're sending a team to the mall to check that basement. Forensics is still processing Jim's photos, but we've got something else." Dan Mitchell, the mall manager? His name came up in old police reports from 1990. He was questioned about Emily's case, worked security at the mall back then, claimed he was off duty that day, but no one could confirm it. Sarah's pulse quickened. "DM from the blueprint. It's him, isn't it? He knows something." Laura held up a hand. "We're looking into it." "But Sarah, you need to stop playing detective. Whoever's behind this is dangerous. Your backyard, that phone call, the guy following you. We're pulling mall security footage from today to ID this man in the jacket." Sarah nodded, but her mind was racing. Dan Mitchell, Jim Thompson, the key. The pieces were falling together, but the picture was still blurry. "Can you test the key for fingerprints?" she asked. Laura nodded. "Already on it. Go home, Sarah. We'll handle this." Home felt like a trap, but Sarah had no choice. She drove back, the key's weight lingering in her mind, even though it was now with Laura. Her house was too quiet, the locked doors and windows doing little to ease her nerves. She sank onto the couch, staring at Emily's photo on the mantel. The diary's words haunted her. "Mr. T, a surprise. Meet him by the fountain. Had Jim lured Emily, or was Dan Mitchell involved? And who was the man in the jacket?" Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. She froze, pepper spray in hand, and peered through the peephole. It was Carl, the Historical Society volunteer, holding a manila envelope. "Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you," he said when she opened the door, his voice shaky. "After you left, I found something in Jim's files. I thought you should see it." Sarah took the envelope, her hands unsteady. Inside was a single sheet, a photocopy of a 1990 mall security log. One entry, dated the day Emily vanished, was circled, "D. Mitchell, basement patrol, 3 p.m. The exact time Emily was supposed to meet Mr. T. Sarah's blood ran cold. Dan had lied about being off duty. "Where did you find this?" she asked. Carl shifted nervously. "It was tucked inside a folder Jim labeled private. I didn't know what it meant until I heard about the bracelet." "Sarah, be careful. Jim was always secretive about his mall research." After Carl left, Sarah called Laura, leaving a voicemail about the security log. Her eyes kept drifting to the backyard, where the gate still hung slightly ajar from last night. She needed answers, and waiting wasn't an option. Against her better judgment, she grabbed her flashlight and pepper spray and headed to the mall again. The service corridor was deserted, the concrete wall just as she'd left it. She pressed her ear to it. Silence. No thumps now. Had she imagined it? She was about to leave when she noticed a faint scratch on the wall near the floor. It wasn't random. A small, deliberate mark, like an arrow pointing down. She knelt, running her fingers over the concrete. A seam, almost invisible, ran along the base. A hidden panel? Her heart pounded as she pushed, and with a soft click, a small section of the wall slid open, revealing a rusted lockbox embedded in the concrete. It had a keyhole that looked eerily similar to the brass key she'd found. She didn't have it, Laura did, but the discovery sent a chill through her. What was hidden here? And why was it so carefully concealed? Footsteps echoed behind her, heavy and deliberate. Sarah spun, pepper spray raised. Dan Mitchell stood at the end of the corridor, his face unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Sarah," he said, his voice low. "Some things are better left buried." Sarah's grip on the pepper spray tightened, her pulse thundering as Dan Mitchell took a step closer, his shadow looming in the dim corridor. The air in the mall's basement felt thick, the faint hum of overhead lights doing little to ease the tension. "Dan, what's behind this wall?" Sarah demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "What are you hiding?" Dan's eyes flicked to the concrete panel, then back to her, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "You're in over your head, Sarah. Go home. Forget this." But his voice had an edge, a crack in the calm that betrayed something darker. Sarah held her ground, the pepper spray a lifeline. Emily's bracelet was in Jim's yard. Her diary mentioned meeting someone at the mall. "And you were here that day, Dan. You lied about being off duty." Dan's face hardened, but before he could respond, a faint sound came from behind the wall again, a muffled scrape, like something dragging across stone. Sarah's breath caught. "What's in there?" she asked, her voice rising. Dan took another step, his hand reaching into his jacket. "Last chance, Sarah. Walk away." Instinct took over. Sarah sprayed, the mist catching Dan full in the face. He staggered back, cursing, clawing at his eyes. She didn't wait, sprinting up the stairs, her flashlight bouncing wildly. She burst into the mall's main level, weaving through early shoppers, her phone already dialing Laura. "It's Sarah," she gasped when the detective answered. "I'm at the mall. Dan Mitchell, he's hiding something behind that wall. I heard noises again. He tried to stop me." "Sarah, get out of there now," Laura barked. "We're on our way. Stay in a public area." Sarah pushed toward the food court, blending into the crowd, her heart still racing. She glanced back, no sign of Dan, but the weight of his words lingered. Some things are better left buried. She found a bench near a busy pretzel stand, her eyes scanning every face. No man in a dark jacket, no Dan. But the key, the wall, the noises, it all pointed to something hidden, something tied to Emily. When Laura arrived 10 minutes later with 2 officers, Sarah led them back to the basement. The panel was closed, the scratch mark barely visible. Dan was gone. Laura examined the lockbox, her gloved hands tracing the seam. "This isn't on any blueprints," she said, frowning. "We'll need a warrant to break it open, but I'm calling in a locksmith now. Sarah, you're sure about the noises?" Sarah nodded. "Like something moving, alive." Laura's expression was grim. "We pulled Dan's records. He was disciplined in '91 for inappropriate conduct, with a minor at the mall, never charged, case dropped. He's looking shadier by the minute." The locksmith arrived, a wiry man with a toolkit. The lockbox popped open with a groan, revealing a narrow passage behind the wall. Damp air wafted out, carrying the stench of mold, and something worse, something human. Laura drew her gun, motioning for Sarah to stay back. "We go first." The passage was tight, stone walls slick with moisture. Sarah followed at a distance, her flashlight beam shaking. The officers' lights revealed a small chamber, maybe 10 feet square, with a rusted metal door at the far end. Laura tried it locked. "We need that key," she muttered, then turned to Sarah. "You said you found it by the service entrance?" Sarah nodded, her throat tight. The noises were louder now, a faint whimpering from behind the door. Laura radioed for backup, but Sarah couldn't wait. "That's my daughter," she whispered, conviction burning through her fear. "I know it's her." The locksmith worked on the door, his tools clinking in the tense silence. When it finally swung open, Sarah pushed past Laura, ignoring the detective's shout. The chamber beyond was a nightmare bare concrete, a filthy mattress in one corner, chains bolted to the wall. And there, curled in a ball, was a young woman, skeletal and pale, her hair matted. Sarah's knees gave out. "Emily?" The girl's head lifted, eyes wide with terror, then recognition. "Mom?" Her voice was a broken whisper, barely audible. Sarah rushed to her, dropping to the floor, tears streaming as she pulled her daughter into her arms. Emily was 22 now, but starvation had stolen her years, leaving her fragile as a child. "You're real," Emily sobbed, clinging to her. "I thought I was dreaming again." Laura crouched beside them, her voice soft but urgent. "We've got medics coming. Emily, can you tell us who did this?" Emily's eyes darted to the door, fear overtaking her relief. "Him. The man from the mall. He said he'd kill me if I told." Sarah's heart shattered. "Dan Mitchell?" Emily nodded, trembling. "And others. They took turns." Sarah held her tighter, rage and grief warring inside her. Laura stood, radio crackling as she called for an APB on Dan Mitchell. The medics arrived, gently lifting Emily onto a stretcher. Sarah never let go of her hand, following as they moved through the passage and up to the waiting ambulance. Outside, the mall's bright lights felt obscene against the horror they'd uncovered. As Emily was loaded into the ambulance, Sarah glimpsed a figure in the crowd, the man in the dark jacket, watching. He turned and vanished before she could point him out. Sarah clung to Emily's hand as the ambulance doors closed, the sirens cutting through the chaos outside the Cloverdale Mall. Emily's frail form trembled under the blanket, her eyes fluttering between exhaustion and fear. The paramedics worked swiftly, checking vitals and starting an IV, their faces grim at her condition: severe malnutrition, dehydration, infected wounds. Sarah's heart ached with every bruise she saw on her daughter's skin, each one a testament to 10 years of unimaginable horror. "You're safe now, baby," Sarah whispered, brushing matted hair from Emily's forehead. But even as she spoke, the image of the man in the dark jacket lingered. He was still out there, watching, and Dan Mitchell was on the run. At the hospital, the emergency room was a blur of white coats and beeping machines. A nurse with kind eyes allowed Sarah to stay as they cleaned Emily's wounds, her skeletal frame barely filling the bed. Dr. Sturz. Patel, the attending physician, approached with a clipboard, her expression gentle but serious. "Mrs. Harper, Emily's stable for now, but she'll need extensive care, physical and psychological. We need to ask her some questions about what happened. Is that okay?" Sarah looked at Emily, who gave a tiny nod, her hand tightening around her mother's. "He locked me in that room," Emily whispered, her voice raw. "Dan. He said I was special, that he'd keep me safe, but he hurt me. Others did too. I don't know their names." Sarah's vision blurred with tears, rage boiling beneath her grief. "Did you ever see a man in a dark jacket?" she asked, thinking of the figure who'd haunted her steps. Emily's eyes widened. "Yes, he came sometimes. Never spoke, just watched. Dan called him the boss." Sarah's stomach dropped. The man in the jacket wasn't just following her, he was part of this. Maybe the one pulling the strings. Dr. Patel stepped in. "That's enough for now. She needs rest." Sarah kissed Emily's forehead, promising to stay close, then stepped into the hallway to call Laura. Her hands shook as she dialed. "Sarah, we've got a problem," Laura answered before Sarah could speak. "Dan Mitchell's gone. His car's missing, house empty. But we found something in his office at the mall, photos like Jim's, but worse. Images of Emily, other kids, taken over years. We think Dan and Jim were part of a network. And that key you found? It's a match for the lockbox in the basement. We're pulling prints, but I'm betting Dan's are on it." Sarah's voice was steel. "Emily mentioned a man in a dark jacket. She called him the boss. He's been following me. Library, police station, mall. He's the one behind this, Laura." A pause. Then Laura's voice hardened. "We've got an ID from the mall footage. His name's Victor Crane, a private security contractor with ties to local businesses. He's got a rap sheet for extortion, assault, but nothing stuck. We're hunting him down." Sarah returned to Emily's room, her mind racing. Victor Crane, Dan Mitchell, Jim Thompson, a network preying on kids like Emily. She sat by Emily's bed, watching her sleep, the IV dripping steadily. Hours passed, the hospital's hum fading into background noise. A soft knock broke her reverie. Laura, with Officer Tim Reyes in tow. "We've got Jim Thompson talking," Laura said quietly. "He's scared, cutting a deal. Says Dan recruited him to spot candidates' kids who wouldn't be missed right away. Jim claims he didn't know Emily was being held, just thought she'd been taken elsewhere. He's naming names, Sarah. This goes deeper than we thought." Sarah's fists clenched. "What about Crane?" Laura's jaw tightened. "Jim says Crane's the enforcer, keeps everyone in line, handles problems. He's been watching you because you got too close. We've got an APB out, but he's slippery." Tim handed Sarah a folder. "We found this in Dan's office. It's a ledger, coded, but it lists dates, initials, payments. Emily's initials are in there, tied to 1,990. We're decoding the rest." Sarah opened it, her eyes scanning rows of cryptic entries. One stood out, E.H., dated on 3/15/90, delivered to VC. Her blood ran cold. Victor Crane had taken Emily. As Laura and Tim left to follow leads, Sarah stayed with Emily, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't let Crane slip away. Late that night, her phone buzzed a text from an unknown number. "Back off, or she dies. Attached was a grainy photo of Emily, recent, taken in that basement prison. Sarah's breath hitched. Crane was taunting her. She forwarded it to Laura, who called immediately. "We're tracing the number, but it's likely another burner." "Sarah, I'm posting an officer outside Emily's room. Stay there." But Sarah couldn't just wait. She kissed Emily's sleeping forehead, whispering, "I'll be back," and slipped out, telling the officer she needed air. She drove to the mall, drawn by a gut feeling. It was closed, the lot empty under flickering streetlights. She parked near the service entrance, flashlight in one hand, pepper spray in the other. The door was ajar. Someone had been here. Inside, the basement corridor was silent, the concrete wall now cordoned off with police tape, but a faint light glowed from the passage beyond. Sarah crept forward, her heart in her throat. At the chamber's edge, she saw him, Victor Crane, kneeling by the metal door, stuffing papers into a duffel bag. Evidence, she realized. He was cleaning up. Sarah raised her pepper spray, but Crane's head snapped up, his eyes locking onto hers. "You don't quit, do you?" he growled, standing. He was taller than she'd realized, his presence suffocating. "Where's Dan?" Sarah demanded, her voice shaking but firm. Crane smirked. "Gone. You're too late." He lunged, faster than she expected. Sarah sprayed, but he dodged, grabbing her wrist. The flashlight clattered to the ground. "You should have listened," he hissed, twisting her arm. Pain shot through her, but she kicked hard, catching his knee. He staggered, and she broke free, sprinting for the stairs. Crane's footsteps pounded behind her. She burst into the mall's main level, screaming for help, but it was empty. Her phone was in her cache. She'd never make it. She ducked into a shuttered store, hiding behind a display. Crane's boots echoed, slowing as he searched. "I see you, Sarah," he called, his voice chillingly calm. Her hand brushed something cold, a fire extinguisher. As Crane's shadow loomed, she swung it, catching his shoulder. He grunted, stumbling, and she ran, making it to the exit. Outside, headlights blazed Laura's cruiser, screeching to a stop. "Freeze!" Laura shouted. Gun drawn. Crane froze, hands raised, his smirk gone. Victor Crane's hands stayed raised as Laura and two officers advanced, their guns trained on him. Sarah stumbled back, her breath ragged, the fire extinguisher still clutched in her trembling hands. The mall's parking lot was a kaleidoscope of flashing lights as more police cars arrived, their sirens piercing the night. Laura cuffed Crane, her movements swift and precise, while another officer retrieved the duffel bag he'd been packing. "Evidence," Laura called out, glancing at Sarah. "You okay?" Sarah nodded, though her knees felt like they might give out. "He was destroying it. Whatever's in that bag, it's about Emily." The officers opened the bag, revealing stacks of photos, ledgers, and a small cassette tape. Laura's face darkened as she flipped through the contents. "This is bigger than we thought," she muttered, then turned to Sarah. "You were reckless, but you did good. We've got him." As Crane was loaded into a cruiser, his eyes locked onto Sarah's, cold and unrepentant. She shivered but held his gaze, refusing to look away. He wasn't the boss anymore. Back at the hospital, Sarah returned to Emily's side, slipping into the room where her daughter slept under the soft glow of a monitor. The officer outside nodded, his presence a small comfort. Sarah took Emily's hand, her heart swelling with relief and pain. Emily was alive, but the scars, physical and otherwise, would take years to heal. The next morning, Laura visited, her face weary but determined. "We've got enough to bury them," she said, sitting across from Sarah in the hospital's consultation room. "Crane's talking, trying to save himself. He's fingering Dan Mitchell as the ringleader, says Dan used the mall's basement as a holding area for years. Jim Thompson was their scout, picking out vulnerable kids. The photos and ledger confirm dates, payments, names of other victims. We're tracking them down now." Sarah's voice was hoarse. "And Emily?" Laura's expression softened. "Crane admitted Dan kept her alive because she cooperated. Sick bastard. The cassette tape's a recording of Dan and Crane planning to move her after the bracelet was found. They panicked when you started digging. Sarah's fists clenched. "Where's Dan now?" Laura shook her head. "Still in the wind, but we've got his face on every news channel. He won't get far." As for Jim, he's confessed to luring Emily to the mall for Dan, thought it was just a one-time thing. He's facing life. Crane, too. Sarah nodded, the weight of 10 years settling differently, now not gone, but shared. "What about the other kids?" she asked. Laura's jaw tightened. "We're opening cold cases across the state. This network's been operating for decades. Your persistence broke it open, Sarah." Days turned to weeks. Emily grew stronger, her body slowly recovering under the hospital's care. Therapy began, a long road to reclaim what had been stolen. Sarah never left her side, reading to her from old books Emily loved, their voices filling the sterile room with warmth. One evening, as Emily slept, Laura called with news. Dan Mitchell had been caught in a neighboring county, hiding in a motel. His confession corroborated Crane's, detailing a trafficking ring that used Cloverdale's mall as a hub. The sealed basement had been their prison, hidden from the world. Sarah sat by Emily's bed, watching her daughter's chest rise and fall. The diary, the bracelet, the key they'd led her here, to this moment. Emily stirred, her eyes fluttering open. "Mom?" she whispered. "I'm here, baby," Sarah said, squeezing her hand. "Always." Emily's lips curved into a faint smile, the first in weeks. "I knew you'd find me." Tears fell as Sarah leaned down, kissing her forehead. "I never stopped looking." The trial was months away, but Sarah knew justice was coming. Dan, Crane, and Jim, they'd face what they'd done. The town held a vigil for Emily and the other victims, the mall's fountain lit with candles. Sarah and Emily didn't attend. They were home, rebuilding, one small moment at a time. Sarah's morning runs resumed, but now Emily joined her, walking slowly, her steps growing steadier each day. The bracelet, cleaned and returned by the police, sat on Emily's wrist again, its heart charm catching the sun. As they passed the mall, Emily paused, her eyes distant but resolute. "It's over, isn't it?" she asked. Sarah wrapped an arm around her. "It's over, and we're just beginning."